Hey everybody, and welcome back to Master Visionary. From stress to success, the program that is helping people end the limitation of feeling held hostage in life, frustrated, stuck, and limited, in order to live explosively expressed. Now, you know that the information we keep bringing to you is really life-changing, and today is no different. As a matter of fact, it's going to be even better than you may anticipate, because today's a hangout session with a very, very interesting man. Today, the anxiety guy, known around the world as the anxiety guy, Dan Candell. I could say a lot about him, but I'm going to save the time for Dan to talk about why we're together today to help you. And you can learn more about Dan at his websites, which he'll share in a bit. But I just want to tell you that Dan and I have been around for a long time. We've known each other for a while. And the most interesting fact I always share about Dan is that at 14 years old, he got certified as a hypnotist. Yeah. So you can imagine that he has some experience, no matter how young he may look. So I just want to say welcome, Dan Candell, to Master Visionary.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. It's great to be here. And yes, I just want to add one thing. I'm the anxiety relief guy. Because I don't give you anxiety, I take it away. You said the anxiety guy, but that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, the word relief matters then.
It really does. Just a little bit. I always tell people, I don't give you anxiety, I take it away. I get you relief from anxiety. So we're going to have a hop and bop an hour today.
Yeah, tell them about the title of today's show.
So the title of today's show is How to Get Off the Struggle Bus and Get Your Poop in a Group. And that's a clinical term for, say, get your shit together. Seriously. Right. I like, you know me, I like interesting titles. And Tom, you have a program From Stress to Success. It's funny because I have a program From Stress to Success as well, and they're totally different. They're totally different. You know, after working with people who've been anxious, and especially through everything that's going on in this world, people feeling like they've totally lost control and like they don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. A lot of people feel like they're on the constant struggle bus and like they've just lost it. And that's what I want to talk about today, is give some really core insight and also some techniques to how people can regain their sanity and finally be more productive, be more purposeful, and be more resilient.
Excellent. You know, Dan, well, folks, I want to give you some insight behind the scenes to how usually podcast interviews and shows go. The interviewer will ask for questions from the guest, so it's pretty much known as to what's going to happen during the hour. No, Dan and I are going to have a conversation and see where this thing goes. So I want to ask you this question. So when we say get your poop together, or in a group,
get your poop in a group,
get your shit together rather, or get your act together, what the hell does it really mean? People say things all the time, and when I ask them what these habitual phrases actually mean, they're like, I don't know, I never thought about it. So what does it really mean when somebody gets their act together?
Words have power, Tom, and you know that because you taught me that a long time ago. Words have power, and when people say I need to get my shit together, it means they're stuck in an old way of thinking that no longer serves them, and it also means that they're stuck in a rut, a slump, a funk, whatever you want to call it, and we can tell it to literally go funk off. Or people say, what the funk? You know, people are in a funk and they want to get out of it. They want to start being more productive. They want to start being more motivated, accomplishing and achieving more. And some people just want to regain their life back that they had before anxiety. And for some people, they don't even know what before anxiety was, because that's all they've ever known. That's all they've ever remembered. So get your shit together, to get your poop in a group. It's to get out of the struggle and to get into that way of how you want to feel and what you'd rather do instead.
So living life more selectively, more on purpose. You know, and don't you find, as we all do who work in the service of helping others, that everybody wants to, they'd like to. However, they're a walking contradiction where, without knowing it, they will absolutely sabotage any positive outcomes.
100%.
And this creates that cycle of remaining stuck, right? Or I just don't feel like me. Or
Right.
so,
You're,
what have you found has been some of the most common reasons why people stay stuck,
yeah.
even when they do get some direction, advice, techniques like we'll share today?
Yeah, it's the thoughts that they think about themselves. And I approach my work from a triad. Our thoughts, and if you can imagine a triangle, our thoughts influence our feelings, sensations, and emotions. And those feelings, sensations, and emotions influence our behaviors, actions, reactions, responses. Which, if you have a really negative, nasty thought about yourself or you start worrying about something, that manifests as a thought. And all of a sudden, if you start worrying about that, then you start to feel really gross, really disgusting. There's emotions that are underlying that thought. And then if you start to feel that way, then you start to respond that way in situations. And for a person to live with constant anxiety, it will eventually lead to isolation and avoidance, where people start to avoid the stuff that makes them feel anxious, which is the stuff that makes them have those anxious thoughts. So they're
Mm.
triggered by something. So what happens, Tom, is we've got to start at that thought level and get people to start acknowledging the thoughts so we can become aware of the emotions and then clear the negative underlying emotions. And when we clear those emotions, we can then start creating better responses where people feel more resilient. I call it the bounce back effect. They start bouncing back a lot faster. The panic attacks that were lasting hours are now lasting seconds, just and they're just realization. So it's, oh my gosh, this is something that used to make me panic. Whoa, I'm not that person anymore. And
Hmm.
they totally separate it and become totally so what we're doing, we're severing the ties between anxiety and between what held that person back. That's what it's all about. It's all about becoming aware of the thoughts and then the emotions that are behind the thoughts, and then the responses that they're being triggered by the thoughts and the emotions and feelings.
Excellent. That reinforces what we hear. Again, people hear all these phrases. They really don't know what it means. As you think, so you are. Thoughts
Hmm.
become reality.
Yep.
The way I explain what you just explained is TFAR, TFAR. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, actions lead to results.
Right.
Positive or negative. If you don't like your results, you have to look at the preceded thoughts. But you and I also know a lot of those thoughts are at a subconscious level. And that's why we
Exactly.
need to do the work using the techniques, the protocols, the systems that allow people to access that inner self. Yeah.
Right.
So I have a
Absolutely.
question about a word. The anxiety relief guy. How do you define anxiety to people? How do you break that word down?
Anxiety is an umbrella term. And
Hmm.
anxiety can mean stress, overwhelm, doubt, fear, nervous. It can be any manifestation of how a person does anxiety, because
Hmm.
anxiety becomes so ingrained within people who identify as being anxious that it's so automatic. But what people need to realize, it becomes something that they do. And
Right.
it's like a vicious habit, like a cycle, and it becomes so habitual that people feel like it just starts happening automatically and that they're totally out of control. So I describe anxiety as a as an umbrella term that embodies all of those emotions and feelings and sensations. But with that said, Tom, we've also got to become emotionally aware, because when we're emotionally aware, we can decipher the difference between, say, sadness and anxiety, because
Mm.
everybody will lump all of their negative emotions under anxiety, and they'll say, oh my gosh, I'm sad, I'm having an anxiety attack. I'm angry, I'm having an anxiety attack. I
Hmm.
am so annoyed right now, I must be anxious.
Right.
So when we become emotionally aware and develop more emotional intelligence,
Right.
then we can start separating that and separating out that's why I said what's really underneath the anxiety. And I have something, it's called the anxiety iceberg. And the tip of the iceberg is anxiety, and underneath the surface, the base of the iceberg, is all the manifestations of what people identify as anxiety.
Right. People are listening right now saying, Well, okay. Sounds like just do that and all of a sudden it changes. So yes, folks, easier said than done. Maybe. Because the truth is, as you keep watching, we're going to share some techniques, both of us, some ways that you can immediately start affecting that energetic response that you call emotion and feeling. So hang in there because we're going to share some ways that you can actually become aware and then interrupt that pattern because that's what it's all about. I like to always diffuse words, Dan. So when people say, well, they add that bullshit word disorder on the end of it.
Yep.
Well, a disorder, even through medical research, folks, is only something mechanical or physical that has order. Emotions don't have order. So there is no disorder. So anxiety is being anxious. Anxious is your nervous system being overactive. Like you said, all those triggers that could do it under the umbrella. So they're overthinking because the nervous system is being overactive, and that happens with overthinking. And overthinking usually comes from self-doubt, but most people, as you know, aren't even aware that they're in that stage, right?
Exactly.
And then you're going, what the hell's wrong with me? Tom, you won't believe it. I act like I was 5. So how do you first get somebody to that place of acknowledgement, awareness, honesty, and truth to recognize there's something not right here and I need to own it before we can fix it?
Right. The first step is getting people to, so I have a 5-step. It's identify, locate, rate, shift, and re-rate. So let's talk about identify. A person has to identify the feeling or the emotion. And we do this by saying, when was the last time specifically you felt this way? And how did you know? So let's say it's in the day we're shooting this is a Tuesday. Let's say a person says, the last time I felt anxious was Monday. How'd you know? How'd you know you're doing anxiety?
Yeah.
And people usually look at me and say, what do you mean doing anxiety? I wasn't doing anything. I said, well, you were doing it without realizing you were doing it on an unconscious level that soon became conscious into your awareness. So how did you know you're doing your anxiety? And people say, oh, it's just so scatterbrained. Or some people will say, Tom, I felt it in my chest or in my stomach. And people who have gut issues and people who have like IBS or different gut issues,
Yep.
most of it is underlying emotions that aren't being processed.
That's right.
So if people are saying like, oh, I feel it in my stomach, and then they're worried about they're going to crap their pants 24/7, like I would be too. So we got to direct a person to how they know they're feeling a certain way, so they become aware of it. And from that point, I get them to rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. Okay, so it's yesterday now, you're feeling it in your stomach. Tell me what's happening. So we get a little bit of background of what was happening right before they started to feel anxious. So we're getting insight and we're getting intel, if you will, into what's behind and underneath that anxiety. So it all starts with awareness, and where a person can become aware by identifying the last time they felt uncomfortable. And here's the thing, if you're feeling anxious, not uncomfortable, because we grow when we're feeling uncomfortable, but if you're feeling anxious to the point where it's becoming disruptive to your life and it's holding you back from things, that's where you know it's time to get help and where it's time to reach out to a professional like Tom, like myself. That's where you know it's crucial, is when it starts holding you back.
Like it's a problem when it starts causing problems.
Exactly.
But if you have those feelings and you're fine and you manage them and they maybe even motivate you, then okay, right?
Yep. Yep.
But not many people are in that position.
Right. And the people who are, they're not really reaching out to us because they're managing. And there's 2 spectrums of change for me, Tom. There's management, where you're learning how to interrupt the problem. And then there's, on this side, there's that 4-letter C word we're not supposed to use, cure. So we don't use that word, we use resolve. So there's management and then there's resolve.
Yeah.
And for some people, management is what they need. And for some people, we can get them to that resolve very, very quickly. And some, it's that management which will lead to that resolve. So we're starting with everybody a little different, and that's why we do a client-based approach. Even in a group program, we can still do a client-based approach.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. So now you get them to acknowledge, to again locate, because we know that once we start making the shifts, then they look to the body and they go, oh, it's not in the same place, right? So we know it's moving around,
Yep.
Working on the release.
Yep.
So now you get them aware, they're okay, I own it. You know, like I tell people, every problem and every solution's in the mirror. I don't care where it came from. You
Right.
now have it, so it's yours, right?
Right.
So now you have them there. And again, everyone's different. Like I share with people, everyone has a very time frame and level of change. You know, I want my friend guy. Well, maybe you'll do better. Maybe it'll be slower. So then, would the next step to start teaching them some of these management tools, or is there some deeper insight first?
So first I have them rate how they're feeling because there's insight into how we're rating it. So we use the SUDS level, the sensory units of distress. It's
Mm-hmm.
also called the PAL, perceived arousal level,
Mm-hmm.
depending on which discipline you're from or what you're doing. And it's 0 to 10. 0 being like that feeling is totally gone. It's not even there. I can't even find it, all the way to a 10, which is like I am cuddled in the fetal position and I can't move and I feel like I'm having a heart attack. And I'm about to call the hospital. I'm about to go to the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
So on a scale of 0 to 10, we rate it. And the reason why we have them do this is because they need feedback into how long it's going to take to detach from that. And again, we're still on the management side now. So
Mm-hmm.
how long it's going to take to manage that. So I say, 0 and 1, you don't have to do anything. Some people even 2s, they don't have to do anything. The 3s, 4s, and 5s, so we're talking like you can interrupt that pattern in under 30 to 60 seconds.
Sure.
The 6s and 7s, that's where it's going to take about 60 seconds to 2 minutes to interrupt it. The 8s, 9s, and 10s, we're talking maybe about 5 minutes of interrupting that pattern, where before people would have to go to the hospital because they're having a panic attack. They think they're having a heart attack, and it's 5 minutes versus a whole entire day is ruined now, or a whole week is ruined because of that panic attack or that anxiety. Now you're interrupting it in 5 minutes and it's no longer ruining your entire week. And you just say, well, that was a blip on the radar. And again, that's the management. And then from there, Tom, that's where we get into some of the shifts where we teach a person, okay, let's go with like mild life stressors and techniques to handle those. And then we get to major stressors, major panic and anxiety attacks if we need to with that client, and we start teaching them there. So we're working in levels. And then when we teach them these techniques, we put them through the ringer because I want to be confident that the clients that we're working with are going to notice a shift, not after the session,
Right.
but in the session.
Right.
And that's
Because if not, they're just hoping and believing, but this way they have the evidence, right?
They have the evidence, right? And they have that validation. And this is one thing that I notice people, and again, no disrespect to anybody else. I notice a lot of people going to a traditional hypnotist or meditation practice, and they'll say, well, the person just had me close my eyes and meditate or visualize, which works for a lot of people, but
In
it
the
doesn't
moment, but
in
not
the
long.
moment. Exactly. And people will say, well, I left the office, I felt good leaving the office, or I felt good leaving the session, but the next day I saw my mother-in-law again and I went into a full-blown panic attack again. So how do I know it's working? And that's why we're testing these things out with the client to make sure that they're getting instant validation. And we're making sure they get those instant results of stopping the pattern in its tracks. And every time they stop one of those patterns, it fills in that anxious groove more and more. And then we're carving the resource groove. How do you want to feel instead? Confident, resilient. I want to feel focused. I want to feel calm. So we're identifying how they rather feel.
Bringing in that awareness that people are I say people are in a waking coma. Most people are living in a waking coma because of the 90-10 rule, which is 90%. And people don't get this deal about habits. Everyone thinks they have behavioral habits. You know, they bite their fingernails, pull their hair. Folks, emotional reaction habits, thought processing habits, the things that you say, you've said 90% of the time already. Every life is repeated, just repeated, repeated. So the crucial awareness, that spot right there that you're talking about, is getting them to become aware enough to get out of the coma, and then they can start interacting, right?
Right, right. It's almost like we are unhypnotizing them from the reality they've hypnotized themselves into.
Right. That, you know, the thing is, and folks, when Dan keeps talking about interrupting the pattern, we're going to, and Peggy Hyde is here. Peggy, hello. Peggy's a colleague in front of ours. So what happens is the greatest example of interrupting a pattern is we're having a conversation, like say right now, Dan and I are engaged, and somebody bursts into the room. Like, do you mind? They're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And we look at each other and go, what the hell were we talking about?
I don't remember what we were talking about.
Interrupted the pattern, so then the connection's lost.
Yep.
And before we get done, and it's maybe a teaser to you, but we need to inform people and lay this out properly before we give them the exercise or a technique, and a couple of them. And we're going to show you how you can simply and easily interrupt the pattern, which, by the way, was all that thing about snapping an elastic on your wrist. Well, you know what? If I'm wearing the elastic, I'm like, no, I ain't pulling it, man. It hurts.
Right.
But there are better ways, folks, where you can absolutely interrupt a pattern that has become a habit. So it's not really creating anything new. It's getting back to what you knew, especially when you were new, though it can feel new again.
Right.
Right?
And that's where people weren't born anxious, Tom.
No, that's what I'm saying. You're just returning to who you really are. Like you said, dehypnotizing the processes, the habits, and everything that came in that created this outcome, because what we become is not who we are. Who we are is that inner child. That's why there's so much inner child work, folks.
Yep.
Because that's who we really are. And we need to be playful and confident and curious and all of that cool stuff that a kid is.
Absolutely. And you know,
yeah. So well, go ahead, Dan. What would be the next part of the process when you bring in? Oh, by the way, folks, when Dan was talking about it's you get there, but then you become aware. That's getting out of the water. You see, you drown not by falling in the water, but by staying there. Yep. And what we're going to share today is going to help you get out of there so you don't drown in your misery,
right,
frustration.
This next step, Tom, is exactly where we're helping them get out of the water.
Oh, let's do it.
And it is one question which totally breaks the pattern on a very small level, but it initiates that pattern interrupt. And it is the question, so how do you want to feel instead? How'd you rather feel instead? And at this point, the person will usually say, well, I don't want to feel nervous. I don't want to feel anxious.
Stop right there, Dan, because that is a crucial piece that I know other people don't know what you just said and where you're going with that.
Mm-hmm.
And folks, we're going to go to commercial. We're going to come right back, and Dan's going to fill in the rest of that. You need to hear this. We'll be right back.
Are you a CEO or an executive suffering from unbearable stress? Do you feel like you're burning out and your leadership skills are suffering? There's good news. You're only 12 weeks away from turning it all around. The Master Visionary Coaching Program gives you all the resources to do so with less effort than it takes to load your groceries into your car. The Master Visionary Coaching Program is by application only. Apply now at mastervisionary.com.
Yes, from stress to success. Hey, folks, I only bring in 6 new clients a month. That's it. So you want to move forward, you want to change your life, go ahead and message me and we'll look at that. And the same with Dan Candell. I know Dan is a pretty busy dude and he doesn't bring in as many clients as he used to, because we both smartened up along the way and realized that we can help people in a better way when we get more selective rather than just trying to fix or help or influence as many people as absolutely possible. All right, so we're back, folks. Now the teaser is over, the cliffhanger is done. So we're going to get them out of the water. We're going to ask them that question. And the question is, how would you rather feel? And then the answers started being, well, I don't want to feel like this and I don't want to feel like that. Go ahead, Dan, because I know this is going to be very important for people to hear.
they're still stuck in the problem state at that point because they're focused still on how they don't want to feel.
Right.
And this is where I'll say, stop. Do you hear yourself in what you're telling yourself? Is that that itty bitty shitty committee in your head is still trying to tell you what you don't want to feel? Because I want to know how you do want to feel. And then this point, Tom, people will say, all right, you know what? I want to feel normal. And I don't accept that.
That's a word. It's very different for all people.
Right. And I don't, I get really tough and really in my client's face sometimes, you know, and for the right person, you've got to. And at this point, I'll usually lean forward and I'll say, what the F does that mean? I have a magic wand. I can help you feel any way you'd rather feel about this. And you want to feel normal? Ugh, who the hell wants to feel normal? And then Tom will laugh.
There you go. Now that's breaking a pattern right there.
That's breaking a pattern, right?
Yeah.
And I'll say, and when the person laughs, saying, as you're laughing now,
right,
think about how you'd rather feel instead.
Yeah.
And that's an embedded hypnotic command. As you're laughing now, how would you rather feel, or how do you want to feel instead?
Right.
Words have power. And when we take this one word now, and we tag it at the end. And I heard you say something, Tom, one time that I started saying in my sessions, and that is, when you live in the now, you've done the opposite. You've done the converse of that, which is
the mirror image of the word now.
Mirror image of the word now, which is right. And then I use this as a confusion technique for my clients. And when you've won, WON, you've truly become one, ONE, with yourself now. You know?
Hey, Dan, you know who else is watching us? And they just gave us a little bit of applause. Larry Quimere and Michelle Duluth and their colleagues as well, folks. You see, the beauty is there's so many people out there that you can find someone that suits and fits you. Dan, I want to go to the don't word. You know, when people start doing that, I say, okay, great. Don't think of a giraffe. I go, it doesn't work, does it? So what do you want? Or they'll say, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be this. I don't want to. I go, okay, that's great. Now tell me what you do want. They go, I already told you. I go, no, you just told me what you don't want, but I don't know what you do want. Right. And isn't this another one of those 90% habits of functioning that people are so conditioned to always point out what they don't want. And then when you say, what do you do want? You see this a lot, right? They go,
all the time.
I haven't thought about that maybe forever.
All the time.
Crazy.
Yeah. And it's so easy for us to go to that negative, what we don't want. It's easier that way. And I think part of it, Tom, boils down to a protective mechanism. We go to the don't so we can protect ourselves into rehearsing the worst case scenario in our mind. So that way, if it does happen, we're a little bit more prepared.
Yeah.
So again, it was once a solution to a problem. And that's where I tell my clients that your anxiety that you were having had been a solution to a problem, right? To keep you safe and protected in some way.
Right.
And we go through some part of the process. We go through this part where we thank the anxiety for trying to keep ourselves safe, or for trying to keep us safe. We actually thank it for trying to solve a problem or to be a solution. And then we update that part by rewiring it. And this is where we get into some of the mindset resets or the rewiring, the pattern, more of the pattern interrupts techniques that we do with our clients. So we're already 30 minutes in. We've already covered a lot of what anxiety is and isn't, and of the pattern of change that people can go through to get their poop in a group and to get off the struggle bus. Because when people are living lives of anxiety, they feel like they're going through this constant struggle.
Right.
And this is how to end the relationship with that struggle. So it's your show, Tom, but I'm going to ask you, should we get into a couple of techniques now?
Well, I was just going to say to you, as much as I love you, I'm going to shut you down right there because it's time. So it's time to share with people a couple of simple go-to empowerment techniques. This is I like to share with people all the time the difference between working with someone who accesses the deep inner quote unquote subconscious mind or inner world or whatever, is that that's where everything's happening. And one way is to help them and let them keep coming, but that's becoming codependent. But what we're going to do today here, folks, what we're going to do now is what we do in our practices, and that is to empower people by teaching them how to apply this stuff themselves while they're getting the guidance, the coaching, the reinforcement, the support, and the accountability, and also learning more and more and more as we proceed. Because once you reach an outcome, it's not done. This is what people don't get. Let me get in shape and then I'll stop doing what got me in shape. No, let me get to a better me and then let me just stop doing what got me there. No. We continue working together, but you won't need as much of the heavy duty work because you're empowered. So let's start with whatever you want to start with, Dan. That is an empowerment technique to help start interrupting these patterns that lead to what we refer to as anxiety.
Yep. So we got to get it out, right? We got to change the energy. So these, I describe them as quick change, rapid transformation techniques, and because anxiety needs energy to fuel itself. So what we're doing is we're unplugging the electrical connection from the anxiety. So it's as if you're unplugging a lamp. The lamp can't light up anymore. By doing these techniques, we're unplugging the anxiety, so that way you can't do the anxiety anymore because the energy is not going to be able to get there.
Excellent.
So this first one is a really quick separation technique that I teach people how to get out your anxiety, how to separate. And the reason why I teach this one first is because it's a really easy but really profound and powerful one, because the reason why people feel anxious is because they're associated into it. So what we need to do is dissociate them out of it. And I call this the SD card. And I, for probably 6 years, got hired to travel around the country and speak for different photography associations. So I started developing hypnotic techniques that photographers would understand.
Developing for photographers.
I see what we did there. So they can
play with words.
So they can put things into perspective, right?
Yeah.
So I developed something called the memory card or the SD card technique. And this now resonates with pretty much everyone. So I'll ask a person, I'll say, what would it be like if you had a little program in your head that was running that anxiety and you could pull it out? And I haven't met a person yet that said, oh, that would be awesome if I could just like pull it out. And then they get into the but I don't think it's that easy. So, well, let's see.
Yeah.
So I have the person say, just imagine plucking it out, and I have them make the sound because now we're building in associations. So imagine plucking it out and look up on a spot, because we know when we roll our eyes up, it prompts us to go into a different state. And imagine you could just toss that little SD card on that spot on the ceiling, and now it's stuck to the ceiling. What's it like having stuck it to the ceiling? What's it like to stick it to the ceiling and now see it outside of you? And people will just stare at it and they'll say, it's so weird because I feel like it's detached, like I'm detached from it, like I'm watching it. So step one is pluck it out, throw the program on the ceiling, and just roll your eyes up and focus on that spot and imagine or think about or picture, visualize, bring your mind to whatever words work for you. Think about what it's like to literally just look at that program now totally external from you. You're totally separated from it. And I'll say, now think about what it would be like if you could totally walk out of this room and leave that program stuck to the ceiling. What would it be like? And again, people will answer that question now in a more positive way because we've wired them that way. And this is like a self-hypnotic technique.
I can hear more do's now rather than the don'ts, because now they're feeling the do.
Exactly. And I'll say, what will you be able to do differently now or do better? well, now I can be more productive. So we go some layers into this now. And again, this is a technique you can do at home, self-paced, where all you're doing, you're plucking it out, tossing it on the ceiling. Imagine that you can just see the program on the ceiling, and then you ask yourself, what's going to be better if I could just, or when I can just leave it stuck to the ceiling? And now you go into what we call peripheral vision, which is a really good way to shift and get those internal thoughts dissociated and get them external. So we soften our gaze and we now become aware. We expand our awareness. So now we're becoming aware of anything but that thing that was there before, that anything but that thing that we were focused on before. So you're now just shifting your focus. And that's it. And what this does, it stops that pattern and it puts you into a more of a resourceful state. And then at that point, if you want to close your eyes and think about how you'd rather feel instead now and activate this neural network now, it puts a person into a much more resourceful, receptive state. And what I'm doing is I'm teaching a person how to do these techniques, essentially self-hypnotic techniques. This isn't the way I used to work, Tom, because I did a TED Talk, and I think you know the story. I did a TED Talk, and it has now gotten over 10 million views on different channels on YouTube. And it was self-hypnosis, and it was a very elementary technique of basically close your eyes as you fall asleep at night and wake up in the morning and project yourself how you want to be and float into the change. And that was basically the technique that I taught. So I started to get a lot of traction from that, and people started asking me, can you teach me how to hypnotize myself out of anxiety? And I'm like, oh no, that's not what I do with my clients. So I had to change, I had to change very quickly and adapt to what I was getting. Yeah. So now I teach people how to gain control, so management, and then the deeper work that I'm doing with them is more towards a resolve.
Yeah.
So if all you did was just focus on how you want to feel instead, and then you imagine taking that program out, tossing it on the ceiling, and now you look up at it, and now you imagine that you see it and it's now outside of you, it's stuck to the ceiling, and then you shift your focus and you just close your eyes and focus on how you want to feel. That technique is going to stop that pattern of anxiety and stress, and it's going to help you start focusing on more resiliency and on more of a state of resourcefulness.
Awesome.
How's that one?
Folks, now remember, once you put the card up on the ceiling, then the next step, which is as important, is to peripherally just imagine, what would I like? What is better? How do I feel now? That's the do. So let me add something onto that, or not onto it, but to complement that, which is another way to interrupt a pattern. See, folks, we've heard a picture's worth 1,000 words. You try to explain something that's in an image and you just can't eloquently express and define and have somebody feel what it's like to see what you took a picture of. So every image has an emotional association. So what we call the subconscious mind, the mind, it has a language and it's imagery. Everything we hear or read turns into an image. Now, what I want you to create is, I have people do 3 go-to images. Like right now, I just got that feeling because there's one, even though my son is 29, when Jesse was about 3, 4, 5, in there, oh my God, the curly blonde hair and the love and hanging out with him and playing with him. And I feel joy and love. And it's the image that does it. So that's a go-to image for me. So here's what's happening, folks. When you feel a certain feeling, when you have an emotional, energetic response, what's happening is there's something you focused on. So we want to interrupt it. We want to walk in the room and break up that conversation, an imagery conversation. So create a go-to image where it was joy, it was love, it was confidence, it was ecstatic, it was inspiring, it was just uplifting, whatever it may be. It might be a kitten, it might be a puppy, it may be a child, it could just be a place that you love. It could have been an experience you had. Now, bring that feeling, that image up, and when you focus on that image, notice how you feel. So you see, first it's honesty. We have to be honest with ourselves. No blame, no bullshit, no yeah buts, no it's not my fault. I don't care if it's your fault. It happened to you. It's yours now. Right? So you're honest, you go, I don't like the way I feel. That's all I need to be honest about. I don't like the way I feel. Well, how would you like to feel? Ooh, the way I did when that happened. We'll bring it up. Your mind doesn't know it's not real. And all of a sudden, you just interrupted the pattern. Now, here's the cool news of all this. People say, well, do I have to do this all the time? Yeah, but you won't be doing it all the time, meaning consciously. So at first, it takes conscious effort to apply these techniques. Put the SD card up there. Pop it right out of there. Be physical, be animated about it. Make it an existing situation like it really is happening. And then it will have more impact. But what happens is when you start to do this with conscious intent enough times, you'll find you're doing it and didn't even consciously intend it because now it's a different habit. So what we're doing is intentionally creating positive habits to go ahead and replace the negative ones. So the SD card on the ceiling, peripheral, how am I feeling? This is the do feeling. And then create go-to images that whenever you're feeling a certain way, you can pull in an image and manage how you feel. And that's who should be managing your feelings. Like, Dan, I once watched this gentleman and I only saw it once. I never saw him again and I didn't get his name, but he looked like an Alibaba genie out of a Disney movie, right? He's on stage being interviewed. And this gentleman asked him something about people making you feel a certain way. And he stopped and he goes, oh, no. I give no one the privilege of managing my emotions.
Right.
That's powerful. So folks,
powerful.
this is how you get to manage your own emotions. Awesome.
Can I add one additional thing?
Go ahead and add to this now.
So this is like a hypnotist recipe book. Like we just keep adding to the recipe.
Yeah.
And by the way, people watching, listening, when you combine the techniques that Tom and I are teaching you, you're going to get a super effect.
Willpower, yeah.
So one of the things that I add on, Tom added on to mine, I'm going to add on to his, is so I call this an anchor thought, right? You have to create an anchor thought, which is an image or a memory or time, something that's really powerful. And one of the ways to give this even greater power, because it already has tremendous power, but one of the ways to give it even greater power is to match a word or phrase that goes with it, and you repeat it 3 times when you want to think of it. So I'm going through mine. So one that, because how many times, Tom, do we have these moments where
let me interrupt you. Folks, did you see what happened to Dan just now and what happened to me? He just brought up his, let's call it a mantra, his anchor words, a phrase. And I brought up the image that one of my go-to images, and notice our emotional states changed without us meaning to, because it's now the way it is.
Right. So it's mine, cool. It's really cool because, see, it brings up these emotions and positive emotions. I love laughter. So yeah. I have these times, I'll just be like driving down the road and I'll just start bursting out laughing because I'll be thinking of one of my anchor thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So I was doing this technique with a client, Tom, and at the time I made a mistake, and I said, he was hypnotized, and I said, link a word to how you want to feel, and say the word out loud 3 times in a row, and I usually would say in your mind, but right. I didn't have a chance to say that because he starts yelling at the top of his lungs, Chewbacca, Chewbacca, Chewbacca. And I'm like, what the? And I just lost it. Like I started cracking up laughing. So my anchor thought
is that experience.
And my word is Chewbacca because I'm thinking of him. And it's funny because this particular client, he ended up becoming one of my students, and he knows that I talk about this all the time. And the other thought that's brought up is he and I just cracking up laughing about me telling that experience and talking to him about how I talk about this in all the classes that I teach, because it's hysterical. So when you add a word
Yeah.
or a mantra to a memory or a feeling, it gives it much more power because it's much easier for you to call
Well,
it
there's
back.
association. Yeah.
Exactly. And I call
And
it
it's a trigger. Boom, you have
it's
it.
a
There's your feeling.
yeah, absolutely. And you can even add emotion to it as
Sure.
well. And one of the things I'll sometimes have people do is touch their wrist and say it, depending
Yeah.
on how they want to feel. There's different things.
I
Sometimes
use the knuckles on this hand.
I like that. I like that. See, when we're
Right.
learning from one another,
Right.
this is what's so awesome. We're gonna have, Tom, this anxiety relief recipe book. That's what, and we just keep adding to one another's techniques. That's what this is gonna be.
That's great. Dan, curious question. When was it we first met?
So it was at the National Guild of Hypnotists conference, I want to say. I was so I'd heard about you, and so not to pat you on the back or pat me on the back, but there's this position that's a really nice position where we create so much stuff. When people say to you or to me like, oh, I've never heard of you before, it's really humbling, and it's actually kind of cool. Like, great, no expectations.
Right.
But I had heard about you because I saw you on Dateline NBC doing a weight loss expose, and the guy that you had worked with had lost more weight than and had been more effective than it.
Pastry chef.
Yes, a pastry chef. Yeah. So at the time, I think I was with the first conference I'd gone to, I was like 21 or 22 years old, and you were teaching a class on your depth method.
The depth model, yeah.
The depth model. And I wanted to go and hear what you had to say. And what I remember about that, it's not what I said or what you said, but it's how you made me feel. And I even talked to you about this a couple of years after, and you said, so what had happened in that class, Tom? Keep in mind, I was like 21, 22 years old. I was the youngest one at the entire conference. I go to your class, I raise my hand, I ask a question, and there's probably about 30 or 40 people in your class. Everybody, when I asked the question, they laughed at me. And I, at that point, I felt so ashamed for asking a question. What you said, whoa, hey, people, let's cut the kids some slack. He's like, and you said, that's a really good question. And here's why we do. And you addressed it, and you made me feel so, so first I had this major insecurity. You stopped it, and you brought the security back.
See, folks, pattern interruption.
Right, exactly. So you made me feel this very specific, warm, acknowledging way, to the point where now we have this this joking banter back and forth to one another, and we're good friends because we shared experiences with one another.
It's always been like that too. Even the parties at my house and hanging out and all that.
Yeah,
we've had a lot of fun. Hey, folks, I want to mention something, and Dan, I want you to verify this as well. Okay.
Sure.
When we start working with people, well, first of all, people keep doing what they're doing, even when it's killing them, because it's familiar. People don't do what's right. They do what's familiar. Then they call it their comfort zone, but it's a rut. So that's why we need to pattern interrupt all this stuff. Now, here's what also happens, and it turns into sabotage, because people start making positive reframes, positive changes. They're healthier, they're happier, they're not in the same miserable place emotionally. Then the people around them start contributing to the sabotage.
Right.
Well, here's what happens, folks. When you start creating change and developing, which is change is constant, it's natural. To resist change is resisting nature. You need to clear out your personal Rolodex. I like to use a phrase, F them all. You see, people who talk will talk. So when you're not doing well, folks, people say, see Barbara, see how she's doing? Boy. But then you crush it and they go, oh, she thinks she's something now. Because the people who talk are going to talk no matter what. And they're talking right now, you just don't hear them. So when the people around you or things around you start getting a little uncomfortable, it means it's time to change. It means it's time to progress. It's time to grow. It's time to rise. It's time to move. This is not a stationary journey. It's all about constantly going. The river is always going, the river of life. So when the people around you start negatively commenting on your progress, realize that those are their issues coming out. Compassion, wish them well, but not in your space. And just, you get what you give. So wish them well,
Right.
but go work it out. And you keep yourself going the way you're meant to go, because they're all going to come and go in life.
Right.
The worst thing we ever do is hold ourselves back because of other people.
I call it,
Make the changes, right? They need to be independent
Yep.
and to not mind what these people are thinking and saying, because those people aren't living your life.
right. I call it a friendship or relationship audit. And
Oh, nice.
look at uh, look at us as an individual. Look at yourself as a bank account, and your friendships and relationships are people making deposits into your emotional bank account, or are they making withdrawals?
Mm-hmm.
Because the people who are making constant withdrawals from your emotional bank account, you've got to set boundaries for those people. If you can't cut them out, you've got to start setting boundaries, and you got to start setting limits. And if they cross those boundaries and they keep making withdrawal, and they're not contributing to where you want to go.
Well, the energy vampire.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly what it is. So just be aware of that, because as you become more aware of it, you start focusing more on the people who fuel you and who
That's
make
right.
contributions. So just be
Hey,
aware of
folks,
that.
this is if it's your parents, your siblings, your wife, your husband, no matter what. You got to ask yourself, from 1 to 10, how committed am I into my life? From 1 to 10, am I going to take my last breath with regret, saying I wish I had? Or am I going to feel like I stepped up? You know, I like that phrase, suck it up, cupcake.
Yep.
So I stepped up, I started managing my life, I made decisions, and it was well worth it. You know, that's why there are divorces and separations,
Yeah.
and there's, well, used to be my friend and things like that. But as Dan just said, now there are some people you can't cut out. He made a very good point. But you got to set the boundaries, and you have to realize I have a buffer zone, and there's a beeper that goes off if they step into my space, and I make sure I keep them out.
Yep.
I've done it with people I'm very, very, very close with, who I didn't cut out, but I just didn't spend the same amount of time. I was more surface relationship with them, and I'll be like, all right, I'm at the barbecue, I'm at the party, but I'm not spending energetic time with those people, because I've learned just keep them away and keep moving forward.
Yep.
So I like to say adults don't like to make adult decisions. If you were married as kids, you go, you're not my friend anymore. People go, what the hell's going on? Not my friend anymore. Don't like what they said. But as an adult, you go, what are people going to think? And how can I do this? And should I not? Fucking make it. Adults don't like to make adult decisions.
Right.
It's the same decision. You just make it complex and crazy.
People do. And because they want to avoid guilt, they want to avoid pain, they want to avoid hurt. And here's the thing, you got to go through the darkness so you can get through the light at the
You
other
said
side.
it earlier, Dan. If you're not challenged, you don't grow. As a matter of fact,
Exactly.
my life has become so wonderfully blissful that I go out of my way to challenge myself, to put myself in uncomfortable positions, you know, to wake up when I really don't want to and actually maybe work out, though I might say, like, I don't have to do that. I don't want to do that. And then I keep telling myself, then you're just going to go into atrophy. So if we're not tested, we're not challenged, there's no adversity, then we don't find out what we're capable of and how we develop and grow and what we can become rather than what we've become.
And you know what, Tom, you and I have both made really positive and challenging shifts over the past year.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about this before we started recording. You did a physical move. I did a little over a year and a half ago. The doctors told me that they thought I had leukemia.
Oh.
And I didn't share that with a lot of people, because to say that my mind went to a dark place is an understatement. After 3 months of testing, found out that I didn't have leukemia. I was unhealthy, and so I made a commitment to my own health and wellness. And I started waking up really early every day, going to the gym, changing what I eat, changing my diet, and I lost 30 pounds. And
Well, that's medicine right there.
exactly, best shape of my life. My relationships were changing though, and I noticed that not everybody was supportive of this. I'm like, so wait a minute, you'd rather I have leukemia and die? Like, I don't get
Well,
this.
you
right?
just went through what we were just explaining about the
Yes.
people around you want to keep you down.
Yes.
Because
Yep.
misery does love company.
Exactly. And people weren't familiar with the changes that I was making. To them, they're like, this is a new Dan. Who's this guy?
Yeah. Well, get
And that
used to it.
happens. Exactly.
That's what I tell them. Get used to it.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, listen, I've enjoyed this so much. I always do, man. I missed the fact that you didn't make my last party before I left New Hampshire, but that's okay. We'll get together anyway. Vegas, probably.
Yep.
But I want you to share any last bit of information while we have a few minutes left, and also everywhere you want people to find contact information where you want people to find information about what we're talking about here.
Definitely. So you can continue this conversation on. I do have a podcast. It's called The Anxiety Relief Revolution, and it's found on all major podcast apps. But a good place to go is my website, which is dancandell.com, DANCANDELL.com. That's a good place to start. I have an anxiety relief quick start on there where you can get started getting relief right away. One thing that I do want to say before I stop talking, there are two things. Number one is when you just focus on one or two areas of gaining control, then we have what's called the carryover effect. And it will start to impact positively other areas of your life as well. We call that the carryover effect. So don't think you have to be so overwhelmed with changing everything in your life. You just make one or two little shifts and it's going to get greater and greater and greater. So keep that in mind. The other is in every interview that I do, every session that I have, or when launching people off into their life, what I always say, and I really do hope and wish these three things for everybody, because when you do this is when you really start to explore within your own happiness and you get that purpose back. And these three things are: be well, do good, and be true to who you are.
No matter what else.
Exactly, in any part of your life. And those words, I really, truly do wish all of that for you, Tom, for your listeners, and everybody who's on today, or anybody who will listen to this in the future.
Awesome. Ditto, Dan. Ditto. So, folks, there you have it. The anxiety relief guy, Dan Candell. And he's more than that, believe me. Whatever the issues are, I mean, it's become so popular in need that it's become a niche that he's carved out. But Dan can help you with just about anything that you're dealing with, because he's been doing this a long time, being of service to others. And you're looking forward to jump into from stress to success, which sounds like a very general way of saying it. But the truth is, we want to be successful in life, and we're all stressed out and limited. So I say, let's get released from being held hostage in the misery of limitations, so you can be set free to live an explosively expressed life.
Hallelujah.
That's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
So Dan, I want to thank you again, man. Big hugs.
Thank you.
Kudos.
Thank you.
I appreciate the fact that you came on, man.
Absolutely. It's been amazing getting to having you be my coffee date for an hour. Thank you so much.
All right, folks. In YCN Media, you've had Cohen and her team. Wonderful. Go check them out if you're looking to really boost what you're doing online with business. And until the next time, folks, mastervisionary.com. Click on that link, work with Tom, and let's chat. Let's see how we can get you from where you are to where you want to be. I'll see you in 2 weeks, Tuesday at noon. And my next guest, it might be a real big surprise, though. How can you beat this one? So I wish you all well. Be true to yourself, as Dan says. Be who you're meant to be, not what you've become. And become the master visionary you were born as. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you for watching the Master Visionary Show. Join us every other Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to remove the block